Tim Freedman from the Whitlams. We haven't had a chat for a while. This is a good time to catch up because there's a lot happening with you, both recording-wise and also live-wise. Let's talk about Black Stump Band to start with, huh?
The Whitlam's Black Stump Band. Well, you're right. I've got sort of two careers happening in parallel. I'm keeping the Whitlams, the four-piece act, going, and we released an album 2 years ago called Sancho. But I've got an Americana lineup as well, which we call Whitlam's Black Stump Band, and that started off as an idea, and it just kept working, and I kept taking one more step, and we've done 2 national tours now, and putting out our debut album in January or February next year.
Well, that's kind of reinventing the Whitlams when you do something like that, isn't it? Because, you know, you're looking back at the back catalogue, basically that old rule, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. You're actually breaking it and fixing it.
Well, when I had the idea, I wanted to try and get 14 or 15 songs to muck around with in the studio with Matt Fell, who's the renowned country producer. And I went through the 7 Whitlams albums and found 1 or 2 songs from each album that I thought had sort of country music themes or chord structures, and we tried them. So the set is about 2/3 Whitlams catalogue and then 1/3 new songs and covers. And we've sort of found that the more popular Whitlam songs, or the more successful Whitlam songs, have actually worked well in an Americana setting. So the latest single is actually No Aphrodisiac, which just works beautifully with a banjo campfire feel. And the one 2 before that was actually Blow Up the Pokies, which I think we changed enough to give it a new life. It was once again banjo driven, but we put it into a 4/4 time signature as opposed to a waltz, and lowered the key. And I enjoyed the way that got new life as well. I mean, you go to all this trouble of writing these songs, and people have been saying for years that you should, this is your property. You may as well exploit it by doing different versions of it. And I was always a little slow to do that. But now I've grabbed onto that idea quite vehemently. And indeed, put a band together that tours the alternative versions.
Well, I guess, like if you want to talk about the reinvention of the Whitlams, we could track that back to 2007, 2008, when you were doing the orchestrated Whitlams shows.
We certainly were known for doing big 80-piece orchestras, and I took a lot of trouble to get some magnificent composers to do arrangements of all our back catalogue. But the band was really playing just the recorded versions with a huge background. I didn't feel like we were reinventing it. We were just giving people a different live experience. Whereas Black Stump Band is it's designed to make people scratch their head.
It's a strange term, that Americana, isn't it, for what is distinctly Australian music?
Well, it just refers to the instrumentation and the style. We have pedal steel, banjo, acoustic guitar, baritone guitar. I'm bringing my hidden influences into the project. I've always loved Steve Earle and Lucinda Williams. And the early Whitlams, we used to go up and down the East Coast playing 3 sets, and Stevie Plunder, my colleague, would always rip out a few Hank Williams songs, or and Jonathan Richman. I've always been surrounded by roots music, and Americana is, it's sort of blues version of country music. It can be quite modern. It can be anything, I think, from, Wilco to Steve Earle, as I said, and it's very comforting music to me because it has such strong anchors in popular music, and so you're not trying to change the world, but you're trying to play a genre well, and that can be quite relaxing.
Yeah, gives you the opportunity, I guess, to bring different voices into what you're doing, like with Felicity Urquhart. Bringing Felicity in for Kate Kelly. Did you feel that you needed that extra voice in there?
Oh, certainly. I needed to make the song Kate Kelly about Ned Kelly's sister different. And I'd always comment before playing it in the Whitlams that, joke that I was rewriting Australian history from a feminist perspective, which obviously wasn't, but it was just a flippant comment. But there was a little bit of truth in it. You know, we're used to men singing the stories, whether they be about males or females. So it made a lot of sense to get Kate Kelly into the song. And Felicity and Josh Cunningham were touring with us in our first regional tour. And I was looking for an opportunity to get Felicity back up on stage, which is always polite with an artist of her caliber. You don't want to feel like they're just sitting in the dressing room for an hour and a half while you're having your fun. So she came on for that song, and she made it her own. And that's just an example of what's happened with experimenting with Americana and roots music, is that not only am I getting to play with different musicians, I'm getting to play to different crowds as well. And I'm thrilled, you know, in 3 weeks, we're playing on Saturday night at the Denny Ute Muster. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully playing the Gympie Muster next year. So I just wanted to work more, and I found this marvelous, fun way of doing it. Now I can work twice as much because I had my mojo back, and I just wanted to get out of the house and challenge myself. So it's been a real joy. It's early days, but it's gone well for. I mean, to think we only debuted at Tamworth in 22, it seems like a lot longer ago than that. We've played the capital cities and the regional tours, and we've nearly finished the album. And I know the band can get on stage now and really put on a good show.
Well, I know a set list can only fit so many songs. A song like The Day John Sattler Broke His Jaw, the Perry Keys track. How does that one fit in? Does that, when you select a song like that, does that mean one of your own doesn't fit?
Oh, I'd ideally like to phase out relying on the Whitlam's catalogue. I'm hoping that the band writes and finds interesting local songs with a sense of place, as The Day John Sattler is. So no, the more strange covers and new material that gets into the set over the next 2 years, the better for me. I think I've stopped. I think I've plundered everything I need to from the Whitlam's catalogue. There'll be probably 8 old Whitlam's tunes out of 13 on the new album. And the next album, it will be time for new stuff.
Because, you know, when you've done the covers in the past, you never go for the obvious cover for an artist, like with Dylan, Tangled Up in Blue, Neil Young, Birds. When you've covered Chris Christopherson, Roger Whittaker, you've always taken, you know, not the obvious song that you would think that people would go for. Is that to give it a sense of your own when you do something like that?
I must say, I do like playing a cover where people vaguely, where the majority of the audience vaguely knows they've heard it, but they're not sick of it yet, or they don't. It's not necessarily part of the canon in the territory I'm playing. And so, Best of All Possible Worlds by Chris Christopherson is a great example of that. It's a great tale of a guy getting into trouble in a small town, mixed with a little bit of philosophy, and it's great to sort of just shine a light on those wonderful lyrics. He was a magnificent poetic lyricist. Sorry, is a magnificent poetic lyricist. And so that works well. Roger Whittaker, well, yeah, we're putting out it's New World in the Morning, and it's politically, it's as if it was written yesterday, but of course, people will just think that they heard it in the airwaves in 72, and it's never on the radio. I suppose one of the secrets is get a song that hasn't been on the radio in the last 30 years, but is still, in your opinion, a classic.
Well, we'll never hear you doing Hotel California then, will we?
That won't be necessary.
Yeah. So along comes 2021. You've got a whole new Whitlam's album to go. It's the first album in more than a decade under the name The Whitlams, and you don't have the opportunity to get out there and perform these songs like you would have done with any other new album. You know, did that affect the new album, or is there more life to come in future Whitlam shows with the new record?
Well, I think I was lucky that I suddenly had to go slow on the album, because I hadn't made one for 10 years. And I it takes a while to warm into the process, writing wise and recording wise. And so when I had to stop and put it off for a year, I was lucky because it ended up being better. I had time to think about it. But I was also lucky in respect when the COVID hit in 2021, I was very nimble, and I would ring my agent and say, right, everything's sort of relaxed a bit now. Book me a solo show in Mudgee, Armidale, Gunnedah and Tamworth and Orange and Dubbo. And I'm going to go out there with my piano in the back of the Subaru and I'm going to play to these people. And so in those lockdowns, when a lot of musicians who maybe can only play in an ensemble were stuck at home, I went out and did 70 solo shows. And sometimes I'd turn up and say, right, I'm going to play my next album from start to finish. Here you go. And I'd play 11 new songs for 36 minutes and then do the greatest hits. So I actually got better during lockdown at playing live because my work ethic was really strong, and I just really found it ennobling to be able to work while other people hadn't managed to find a way to do so. And it meant 12-hour days. It meant driving myself for 3 hours, setting up the merch, doing the sound check, doing the show, signing the tea towels, packing down the piano, and I'd go, oh, that was an 11-hour day. And I'm lucky I can still do it. So it was back to basics for me, and I got to work on the songs as well. So, it's like the Second World War. Some people had a good war and most people didn't. So I had COVID.
And I do love how tea towels have become merch now too.
Oh, they're brilliant. They're so light, great margin, pack them in your suitcase, and easy to sign. Love my tea towels.
The Black Stump band, as we said, is one parallel with what you're doing. On the other side, the Whitlams, with I guess the rock band going out, with Scott Owen in the band as well.
Yeah, Scott, the double bass player, is joining us on this tour. I've had the idea for 5 years because the early Whitlams was very double bass driven. We had a magnificent double bass player called Andy Lewis, and he was responsible for our musical aesthetic in a lot of ways. So Scott and I chatted 5 years ago about this idea. The schedules didn't correspond, and I revisited it again last year, and he was available. So we're starting rehearsals in Coffs Harbour next week, and doing a great run of 10 or 12 dates. And in a few weeks, we're going to actually announce a coastal tour. He's going to join us again from January the 1st. We're going to do that classic coastal tour of Brisbane and Kingscliff all the way down to sort of Wonthaggi over a 2-week period with the double bass. So we're going to get to do this for about 8 weeks in the next 4 months. And I think it's going to be a good, energetic, feel-good show because I just can't wait to hear that catgut again.
It's interesting that it's the early years, 1993 to 1997, so the first 3 albums. So how will a set list in 2023 of the first 3 albums compare to a set list you would have had in 1997 when you only had the first 3 albums?
We always perform things a little, but often they would fall into disuse. And the third album, Eternal Nightcap, really there's only probably 3 double bass songs on it. So most of this Scott Owen part of the show, which will be, probably the first hour, will be from Introducing and Undeniably the Whitlams, which is 93 and 95. There are some numbers I can't say we've never played them, but there are some numbers that I wouldn't have been played since 1996. A big production number called 1995, for example, from Undeniably, is a lot of people's favourite, I've noticed when I've asked. And there's a second reason to do that one because the late, great Ron S. Pino was kind enough to come into the studio and sing the outro for me in those days. It was 1995 and I was friends with Ronnie from basically the Judgment Parlour in Sydney, where we all used to go after our gigs and carouse. And he was pretty famous, and we were nobodies, but he was nice enough to come in and add his distinctive flavour to that song. So it'll be good to remind people of that great part that Ronnie wrote in the studio for that song. So there's that one, and then there's some of the real skiffly stuff that Stevie used to be so good at, like Follow My Own Tracks and Jumpin' Leprechauns. And there are a few lovely ballads which are more piano trio, because, you know, a classic piano trio does have double bass and piano and drums. There's a few ballads I haven't done for a long time that Scott will render wonderfully. So it's one for the true believers, shall we say, that lived with these albums maybe 20 years ago, but have definitely not heard a lot of the songs for a long, long time.
So that gives you a lot of distance between these songs too. So are you hearing these songs with new ears?
Yeah, they're strong. They're strong. I think particularly undeniably the Whitlams, when Stevie was still alive, he wrote half the songs, and they're brilliant songs. There's a song like End of Your World. There's a song like You Don't Even Know My Name. And he wrote narrative songs. He obviously spent a lot of time on the lyrics. He was very country rock in a way. So doing the Black Stump stuff is almost full circle back to Stevie. He would have fitted in really well with this Black Stump version of the Whitlams. No, I think there was a reason. I mean, we didn't only make it big we only made it sort of big and in the mainstream with Eternal Nightcap. But I sometimes have to remind myself that we had a really good following before that album, because we had some good songs and because we worked hard. And for example, launching Eternal Nightcap before we even knew that it was going to get that ballad, No Aphrodisiac, was going to get any airplay. When we launched it to 4 Harbourside Brasserie shows in Sydney, which, you know, not every pub band on the corner can, you know, play to 1,800 people to launch their album. So that showed that we had we'd worked hard. We'd built it up organically, which is why we were a very independent music story at the time.
And I guess now that the band has been around for so long and you've built up a much bigger fan base than what was around in 1993, 94, 95, some of these songs you'll be playing to many more people on this tour than you would have played to them when they were new.
Yes, that's the economy. That's the size of the rooms. Yes, well, you know, I think I've got 13,000 tickets to sell on this tour. Probably would have taken us 18 months of 150 gigs a year to play that many in the old days. Yeah.
Wow, it's incredible economics to even know that you have that many tickets to sell on a tour.
Oh, I keep my eye on things. Let's put it that way.
So, recording wise, release wise, is it a Black Stump Band album that we're getting next?
Yeah, it's the Whitlam's Black Stump Band. Probably late January, February. Really very close to finishing. Matt's mixing some tracks down at his studio in Tasmania. I've just got to put a few harmonies on 1 or 2 tracks, and it's done. For once, I might actually have everything to the long lead journos without a panic. I'm hoping to be able to send it out around to you and your cohort in about 6 weeks.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And there's only ever been the one album under your name, Australian Idol, I think 2011. Will you do another album as Tim Freedman, or will the next album after that be the Whitlams?
No, I think it'd be a Whitlams album. The solo thing was fun, but it didn't really pop. I think I've found it that it's good for me to have the Whitlams in my moniker. People know what they're getting. But you remind me, I've got to get that album back up on Spotify, the solo one, because Sony, it was on Sony, and they gave it back to me in that part of that process where they were just being nice to older artists and catalog that's not going to make them a huge fortune, and they just found it easier, rather than to administer it, to say, can you take this? So I've got it sitting in the cupboard, and I need to put it back up on the streaming services.
Well, you had a very good track record being the record executive, with Black Yak.
I would question that, Paul. we gave it a shot. We had some great artists like Pre-Shrunk and Iota and Paul Capsis, but nothing really popped for us. The only thing that sold for Black Yak was Eternal Nightcap, and and
And that
we
one didn't do too bad.
that one was good. We mimicked a major record company very well. We had staff ringing record stores and Sebastian Chase setting up the strategies in the background, and we had a lot of fun selling 200,000 records back in '98. Yes.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine you as the record exec with the stretch limo and the cigar. That's just not Tim Freedman.
No, not at all. No, no. I've got all this stuff's going out on my own label. We call it EG Records, named after Edward Goff Whitlam, and but I'm the only artist on the label.
EG Records, fantastic. Well, Tim, good to see you.
You too, Paul. Good to catch up.